President Trump just signed a bill forcing the full release of the Epstein files. And if you're confused, you're not alone. For months, Trump called this whole issue Democrat hoax. His Department of Justice released a memo in July saying that there was nothing more to share. And he attacked members of his own party who pushed for transparency. Then, last week, the House passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The Senate passed it unanimously. Trump signed it the same day. So why is he approving of this now? Well, there's a lot of rumor mongering and theorizing, and it's leaving everyone pretty confused. So I want this to be the one video that you have to watch to understand what is going on right now with the Epstein files. The Department of Justice now has 30 days from the signing of that act to release everything. So what changed? And what are we actually going to get? In this video, I'm going to do 4 things. First, I'm going to clear up the semantic confusion because most people are conflating 2 completely different things when they talk about the Epstein files. Second, I'm going to give you the timeline of what happened this year, the hype, the spectacle, the disappointment, the MAGA revolt, and Trump's reversal, so you understand how all these things are connected. Third, I'm going to steel man both sides of the debate. Trump says that this whole thing is a Democrat hoax. His critics say the man doth protest too much. I'm going to explain what both of those arguments actually mean and lay out the range of possibilities to help you evaluate them. And fourth, I'm going to give you a perspective on what's actually going to come out of this file release, as well as what's already been released that you might have missed. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about the semantic confusion, because here's the core distinction most people are missing. The Epstein files is a factually verified thing that exists. These are Department of Justice investigation materials, court records, FBI documents, evidence compiled during the criminal cases against Epstein in New York and Florida. And this is what Congress just voted to release. On the other hand, there's the Epstein list, or the Epstein client list. This is something that is rumored to exist, but right now it's an unverified myth. And there's never been conclusive proof that it actually exists. The idea of the Epstein list is that somewhere Epstein kept a secret ledger, a document where he wrote down every powerful person that he trafficked children and women to, a blackmail document that would bring down the global elite. Now, the Department of Justice says it doesn't exist. In July, the DOJ released a memo saying that their systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. Now, you might not believe them, and that's fair. But here's what we need to understand. The client list is actually a conflation of 3 real things that do exist. There's the flight logs, which are records of who flew on Epstein's plane, and those have been public for years. There's the Black Book, Epstein's contact directory of over 1,000 names, including his dentist. Gawker published that in 2015. Then there are court documents, depositions, and testimony from victims naming specific individuals. None of those is a neat document titled People Who Abused Women and Children. Brad Edwards, the attorney who has represented hundreds of Epstein's victims for nearly 2 decades, said, "I've never seen a list of people that Jeffrey Epstein kept that would say, here's a list of men that I've sent women to. That's just not something that he was keeping." So when you hear people saying release the Epstein list, understand that they're asking for something that may not exist in the form that they imagine and was always a rumor. So the files exist, but a neat client list never has been proven to. One more distinction. There's actually a third category you should know about, and it's a new category. It's the Epstein estate documents. This is new as of this year. In August, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Jeffrey Epstein's personal estate, not the Department of Justice files, but his private records, emails, correspondence, calendars, and his estate started producing documents in September. This matters because the DOJ files are investigation materials, what the government collected. Estate documents, on the other hand, are Epstein's personal records, what he kept. And it's the estate documents that have already been producing revelations as of late. 2 weeks ago, the House Oversight Committee released over 20,000 pages from the estate. And that's where the Larry Summers story came from. Larry Summers was a former Treasury Secretary under Democratic administrations, a former Harvard president, and a member of OpenAI's board. And he had hundreds of emails with Epstein spanning 2013 to 2019. That's 6 years of correspondence after Epstein's first conviction. So imagine that. Larry Summers was still talking to Epstein after he had already been convicted once. So we have records of Summers asking Epstein for dating advice, discussing Harvard projects, making comments that many people consider sexist, his wife soliciting donations from Epstein for her nonprofit. Now, none of that was criminal, and there's no evidence that Summers committed any crime. But people considered his judgment so catastrophically bad because he was maintaining a close relationship with a convicted sex offender for years that when it became public, he was done. He resigned from OpenAI, he went on leave from Harvard, and he's stepping back from public life. Now, that might not be justice in court, but it's justice in the court of the public opinion. And for an elite, that kind of exposure is its own form of consequence because it's social consequence. And there might be more coming because the committee has released about 65,000 pages total so far and is still reviewing more. Now let's talk about the timeline. For years before Trump returned to office, people close to him hyped the existence of a secret client list. In November of 2023, Kash Patel, who is now the FBI director, appeared on Benny Johnson's podcast, and he was furious that House Republicans hadn't obtained the alleged list. He said, "What the hell are House Republicans doing? They have the majority. You can't get the list? Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are." In September of 2024, Dan Bongino, who is now the FBI deputy director, said on his podcast, "Folks, the Epstein client list is a huge deal. It's going to rock the Democratic Party." Those are guys who are now in Trump's administration. So you can imagine why many people who listened to those guys before they got into office feel that they're now being misled when they're told that there's no client list. Trump also set expectations. During the campaign, Trump himself was asked twice about releasing the files. In June 2024 on Fox and Friends, he said, "Yeah, I would. I guess I would." Then he added that he wasn't sure because you don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there. Then in September of 2024 on Lex Fridman's podcast, he said, "I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I have no problem with it." So by the time Trump took office, expectations were already high. It would be strong to say that Trump was campaigning on it because it's just something that he responded to in interviews, but his own people had been saying for years that a secret list existed and they'd release it. Fast forward to February, when Attorney General Pam Bondi raised expectations even more. On February 21st, she was asked on Fox News if a client list would be revealed.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
Now, whether she meant an actual client list or just the case files, she created massive expectations that there was more to come. And then she made things even worse when, in February, she held a press conference. She invited MAGA influencers to the White House. She handed them white binders labeled the Epstein Files Phase 1. They treated this like it was a victory lap. But when people looked at what was in those files, they realized that almost everything in there had already been made public. So people were frustrated and disappointed. But Pam Bondi said, "Well, don't worry, a Phase 2 release is coming." Fast forward to July 2025. Instead of a Phase 2 happening, the Department of Justice releases a 2-page memo. They say no client list exists. Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. No further disclosure would be appropriate. That was it. Trump's base erupted. The very people who had been hyping the client list for years were now in charge, and they were saying it doesn't exist. And then to make matters worse, instead of addressing the concerns, Trump called the whole thing a Democrat hoax. He questioned why people were obsessing over a dead guy. He attacked members of his own party who pushed for transparency. He called Marjorie Taylor Greene, Marjorie Trader Greene, and Thomas Massie the worst Republican in Congress. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of Trump's most loyal defenders for 5 years. And after Trump called her a traitor, she broke with him publicly. She stood with the Epstein survivors outside the Capitol demanding the file release. She told the public how after Trump called her a traitor, she started receiving death threats. And to top things off, after Trump withdrew his endorsement and said he'd back a primary challenger to Marjorie Taylor Greene, She announced that she's resigning from Congress effective January 5th, 2026. In an interview with CNN, she did something pretty remarkable for a politician. When asked why she never spoke out when Trump attacked his political opponents the same way, she said, "I think that's a fair criticism. And I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics."
I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country. And it's been something I've thought about a lot, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated.
Whatever you think of her, that's a positive thing to say. Now, before Congress actually passed the bill demanding the release of the files, Trump was resistant. But suddenly, he reversed course. He posted on Truth Social that Republicans should support the bill. And in the House, the bill passed 427-1. In the Senate, the bill passed unanimously. And Trump signed the bill the same day, starting the clock. The Department of Justice now has 30 days from November 19th to release the files. Trump also ordered the DOJ to specifically investigate Democrats connected to Epstein, like Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman. And Bill and Hillary Clinton have actually been subpoenaed to testify before Congress on December 17th and 18th. Now, here's where I want to give you something you're going to struggle to find elsewhere: an honest evaluation of both sides of the argument. Let's evaluate the Steelman case for Trump. When Trump says that this is just a Democrat hoax, he doesn't necessarily mean there's nothing in the files. He means that the timing is suspect. Because think about it. The Democrats controlled the presidency and Congress under Biden. They never made the Epstein files, being public, a priority. Kamala Harris was never asked about releasing the files. Biden never pushed for it. The Democrats' push for transparency only really materialized after they saw that it was causing Trump problems with his own base. The MAGA base started getting upset about the July memo, and then suddenly Democrats cared deeply about Epstein transparency. So from Trump's perspective, this is the Russia collusion playbook all over again. Take something tangentially related to Trump, amplify it endlessly, and make it the story instead of his actual agenda. Now, the best counter-argument that Democrats have to that is that Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Epstein's accomplice, had an ongoing criminal appeal, and that was still active until October 2025. Until then, you could argue it would have been inappropriate to push for the file release while there was still an ongoing legal process. But even granting that, the timing is suspiciously convenient for the Democrats. This became a political weapon only when it was useful against Trump. Now, here's the other side and the steel man against Trump. It's basically that the man doth protest too much. Trump's resistance wasn't just against the Democrats. He attacked his own base. He attacked his own party members. He called loyal supporters traitors for wanting transparency on an issue he himself said he'd address. People are used to Trump dismissing Democrats. That's expected. But dismissing his own people, that's different. His resistance was so strong and for so long that people started to wonder, what is he hiding? Because let's be clear about what happened. For months, Trump called the whole issue a hoax, attacked reporters who asked about it, attacked Republican members of Congress who pushed for the release, and questioned why anyone cared about a dead guy. He had his own attorney general promise a phase 2 that never came. And then, only when a bipartisan supermajority was about to force his hand, he reversed course and claimed he supported it. That pattern of behavior looks suspicious to many people, even if he's completely innocent. So let me lay out the actual range of theories. Theory 1 is that Trump is really implicated in the files as having sexually abused women and children. Theory 2 is that Trump isn't implicated in the abuse, but is implicated in other things, like financial crimes. Because Epstein was investigated for money laundering in 2007, and JP Morgan filed suspicious activity reports covering over $1.3 billion in transactions, and there was a time when Trump and Epstein were friends. So there are financial threads that were never fully explained or prosecuted. Theory 3 is that Trump isn't personally implicated, but people he's associated with and wants to protect are. Theory 4 is that Trump was sincerely resisting purely out of political calculus. He genuinely thought that this is a big distraction from his agenda: tariffs, immigration, foreign policy, and he's annoyed that his base is focused on a dead guy instead of his accomplishments. Now, in my personal assessment, here's what I keep coming back to. Trump committed to releasing the files when he didn't have to. Frankly, this wasn't a major campaign promise. It came up in a few interviews. There wasn't a tremendous amount of pressure on him before his own administration hyped it. His own administration brought all of this to attention with a February press conference when there wasn't much attention on the files to begin with. So if you're hiding something, why hold a huge media event drawing attention to it? He's also giving this more attention by ordering investigations into the Democrats. And eventually, he did sign the bill. Given all of that, it's highly unlikely that he's trying to cover up evidence of him abusing women and children. That theory is by far the least likely. But which of the other theories might be higher probability? Well, I'll go into deeper detail on the probability framework in part 2. In the meantime, what should we expect from the file release? Well, here's what's likely. Names of people associated with Epstein, flight logs, visitor records, witness statements, and depositions, internal Department of Justice communications about the investigation, and tangibly, more embarrassment for people who exhibited bad judgment, like Larry Summers. But here's what's really unlikely. Mass arrests, a neat client list document, or smoking gun proof for new prosecutions. Because here's the hard truth. The standard for criminal convictions is extremely high. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. That bar is deliberately high to protect the innocent. The Department of Justice already investigated Epstein. They charged him, and they charged Ghislaine Maxwell. If they had evidence in those files to prosecute other people to those same standards, they likely would have. So what's left in those files is likely evidence of guilt by association, evidence of poor judgment, evidence of proximity to evil. And that's enough to end some people's careers, but it's not enough to send people to prison. And here's the exact problem that so many people are frustrated with. When it comes to finding a smoking gun, especially for elites, it's very difficult. These people are operating at the highest levels with lawyers and accountants and layers of protection. There's a lot of association that looks bad, but proving criminal conduct beyond all reasonable doubt is different from proving that someone was connected to Epstein. So here's what's already happened. Larry Summers already fell, not through prosecution, but through exposure. The estate documents revealed his terrible judgment, and that was enough. More revelations are coming from those 65,000 pages of documents the committee has released. So there's the landscape. Hopefully by now, the semantic confusion about the client list versus the files has been cleared up. The timeline of what happened has been cleared up, and you understand both sides of the argument. And you have some realistic expectations about what's coming. In part 2, I'm going to give you the full probability framework, actual percentages for each of the 4 theories I described about Trump's behavior based on the evidence. I'm also going to go deeper on the Larry Summers case because that's the model for what these file releases are actually going to produce. So part 2 is available exclusively for my paid subscribers. If you want to become a paid subscriber, I recommend that you follow me on Substack and become a subscriber. Because not only does that support my work and make it so that I can stand out on a beach talking about government cover-ups, it keeps you in the loop on when I make future content like this. Even if you decide not to become a paid subscriber, thanks for taking the time to get clear on what's going on.